Yes, good morning and welcome to Citizen Extra, the Monday edition with me, Fred Indimuli. We're looking at quite a number of things this morning. There's been hue and cry from a number of politicians with regard to a statement attributed to NASA presidential candidate Raila Odinga while campaigning in Kajiado last week. In fact, one of the headlines on the dailies this morning screamed, "Arrest Raila," over what accuses of the opposition chief term as incitement. 49 days to the elections. Is this simply an indication of rising political temperatures, or is there real concern on issues of cohesion? Are there topics considered no-go areas in this campaign, like land, for example? Even as we seek answers to these questions, we probably need to examine the political rhetoric further. Are politicians raising these issues on campaign platforms with a genuine intent to address the problems, or are they only keen to shake up the electorate into some form of agitation? Meanwhile, the National Super Alliance was this morning set to launch its manifesto outlining its plan of action if they clinch power at the August elections. That launch has since been postponed to next week. NASA saying they're giving room for the Muslim community, which is observing the last 10 days of the holy month of Ramadan. Early indications were that Jubilee was also planning to launch its manifesto this week. How important are these documents we call manifestos? By launching them a month to the elections, does it mean that we could see a change in the campaign agenda? Or have we already been treated to a preview of what is to come? Away from politics, and as Kenyans continue to grapple with the shortage of unga, CS for Agriculture Willie Bett now proposes that we should start consuming other foods apart from ugali. Is it that simple? Is this the best solution? Is the CS saying that he has done all that he can to ensure Kenyans get to enjoy their staple food regularly? Also happening today, nurses who are on the third week of a nationwide strike will hold what they're calling a 5,000 protest march here in Nairobi. We have reporters stationed everywhere. We have pictures, live pictures from Uhuru Park as well. We'll be showing them to you in a short while. Elsewhere, multi-agency exercise dubbed Exercise Dumisha Utulivu 2017 will be officially open today at the Humanitarian Peace Support School, Embakasi Garrison. All the discipline services, KDF, NPS, NIS, KPS, KWS, KFS, NYS, NDOC, Nairobi County Fire Brigade and Emerging Response Units are taking part in that exercise. Let's now let you know what we are covering elsewhere this morning. Yes, we do have Wilkista Nyabwa stationed at Uhuru Park, where the 5,000 march by nurses will be kicking off in about an hour or so. Elsewhere in Kisumu, our reporter Laura Otieno is on standby with an update of the nurses' strike. And you can see live pictures as well there from Coast Provincial General Hospital, just showing us what exactly is happening in that location with regard to the nurses' strike. We'll be getting an update from all these reporters in a short while. We do also have live pictures from London. This is from Finsbury Park in London, where a man has died and 8 other people have been injured after a van plowed into pedestrians near a mosque in London. Remember, this is less than a week after that fire incident happened, still in London. In studio, we do have guests. We do have Michael Agwanda and Johnson Githaka, experts, analysts, as well as Vincent Kimosop is also in studio, helping us analyze the happenings of the day. We'll be discussing a lot more with this gentleman in a short while, but now let's take an update from Uhuru Park. Let's kick off with Wilkista Nyabwa. Very good morning to you, Wilkista. What exactly is happening at Uhuru Park as we speak?
Good morning, Fred Indimuli. Now we are at Uhuru Park and the nurses' strike has entered its third week today. You can see a bit of activity behind me. Nurses from around the country are arriving here just as they did last week. They will be marching. Last week we did see them marching from Uhuru Park, assembling at Uhuru Park and marching all the way down Uhuru Highway, going all the way to the Council of Governors office at Delta House in Westlands. Then from there they went to the SRC offices on Gong Road, finished at Ministry of Health at Afia House, and then they came back down and they dispersed. And all these, this was just to speak to all the stakeholders who they feel are holding up the negotiation process. Nurses have said that they have negotiated their CBA and they're only waiting to sign it, and they have called the COG and the SRC stumbling blocks in this process, saying that they will take nothing less than what they had already negotiated, which the COG has disputed, and so has the SRC, saying that the amount the COG did not show how it was going to fund this amount, and saying that the amount negotiated did not adhere to the guidelines. Last week we also did see the COG just telling the county governments not to make remittances to the union until just their membership has been verified. And so this is something that is going on. There are various issues that have come out. We have also seen a split between different factions of the nurses union, but we have had the Seth Panyako just speaking about this, saying that the nurses strike will continue, and that what they are agitating for is that the CBA be signed as it is. And so today we will see them marching down the same route that they went last week, following up on that to see whether they make any progress in their negotiations, in the talks, and whether finally nurses will be going back to work. Back to you, Fred Indimuli.
Chris will be coming back to you once that protest march kicks off. They're calling it the 5,000 protest march. They'll be marching from Uhuru Park later this morning to Delta House, which houses the Council of Governors, later to SRC, where the Salaries and the Remunerations Commission is stationed. We also need to get an update from Kisumu as well. We do understand Laura Otieno is on standby, but we also understand that this 5,000 march by nurses brings together nurses from different counties, including Kisumu, including Mombasa. You saw earlier pictures there from the Coast Provincial General Hospital as well. Quite a number of questions that we'll be looking at today with regard to that particular nurses strike. We are now ready with Laura Otieno from Kisumu. A very good afternoon to you, Laura. How exactly is the medical situation in Kisumu now that we understand most of the nurses have come now down to Nairobi to take part in this protest march? They're calling it the 5,000 march.
Yeah, thank you very much. And of course, here in the lakeside city of Kisumu, there are several issues that are going on here. For example, the nurses strike, of course, it's entering its second week today, and the officials here, speaking to the branch chair, Flora Ambani, she said that they will be having a grand march, of course, in solidarity with their Secretary General, Seth Panyako. If you remember, on Friday, some politics played out in the union where we had two factions, where the chair, Mr. John B, was actually calling the strike illegal, and Seth Panyako, who was saying that the strike was actually protected. So the nurses here will be marching on the streets later on today in solidarity with the Secretary General, Mr. Seth Panyako, of course, demanding that until their CBA be signed, they're going to stay out of hospitals and not be offering services in all government hospitals. And of course, here in the lakeside city of Kisumu, politics, of course, played out in the course of the weekend, and today we are having reports that supporters of one Mr. Koyo are actually demonstrating near the IEBC offices. This is following a directive by the High Court on Wednesday that ordering Professor Ayecho Olwenyi to be given the party certificate. Of course, if you remember, last month Koyo was the incumbent member of parliament for Muhoroni. That is, Koyo was given clearance by the IEBC to run for the August 8th polls as the member of parliament. And of course, last week the High Court directed that the party certificate actually be given to Professor Ayecho Olwenyi, who disputed the nomination results, saying that some of his votes are not counted. And of course, that is a story we'll be following up. The supporters of Mr. Koyo are picketing around IEBC offices. They're waiting for Professor Ayecho to show up, and hopefully they're hoping to bar him from accessing the certificate. And that is basically what's going on here in county number 042, Kisumu County. Back to you, studio.
Thank you, Laura, for that update from the lakeside city of Kisumu, of course, with regard to the nurses strike and the politics playing out in Kisumu as well. Of course, we'll be coming back to Laura Otieno for an update. As she says, there could be a protest later on by nurses. We do understand that the biggest protest march is happening in Nairobi. We'll be following up updates on that as well. And of course, we'll be discussing that issue of the nurses strike. Is this an indication that we are staring at another prolonged industrial action like what we saw in January with the doctors' strike as well? But for now, let's take a look at something else that's headlining on most news outlets. And As I introduced earlier, my guests in studio, we do have Vincent Kimosop, Michael Agwanda, and Johnson Githaka. They are our analysts this morning. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome. We now want to discuss this issue about political talk, and it emanates from what we saw when NASA went campaigning in Kajiado. One of the remarks attributed to the NASA presidential candidate Raila Odinga, making headlines still today. One of the headlines was this morning is screaming, "Arrest Raila." But questions, even without going deep into what exactly Raila Odinga says in that particular issue, on that particular issue, we are just asking the questions: is this simply an indication of rising political temperatures, or are there real concerns on issues of cohesion? Vincent.
Thanks, Fred, and I think we'll start by wishing you guys a happy belated Father's Day.
Oh, happy Father's Day
to warm the room. Yeah?
Thank you.
Fred, I think you have to appreciate that we have 49 days to the election, and everything that comes to the fore will be milked by any side of the divide. So you have listened to what Raila said. I think from a political perspective, Raila was speaking to the Maasai populace and really showing why he is the champion and the person to advocate for their rights. And then, of course, from that, it has been spinned. And if you want to see how it's working, look at the headline. I think it was one of the daily saying, "Arrest Raila." What does that? The message is very clearly. It is one side of the divide seeking to use that and to achieve the following: one, to reinforce, for example, you remember the reinvention of the ICC question in the campaign. Number two is also to excite their bases and paint, for example, the other side as we are the part of the stability, progress and development. This is the side of violence and instability. So it is, I think the title "Arrest Raila" needs to be read in that context. It is not necessarily the rising tensions and really a heated campaign, but really the antics that plays out as we move in a political environment. So I think we have to really read beyond the headline so that we understand the context within which this is happening. I can tell you for surely Raila will not be arrested. In my view, it is that will now give this another spin. You remember, our election really is around the issue of ethnicity. So he has a solid block that he speaks to. And if you actually, I can tell you, if they arrest Raila, that will be, as in even, you remember this concern about independent people who are in ODM, who are saying, oh, we will still support. It will solidify that base because now they will have one enemy to fight, maybe now the system. So in my view, it is just politics. Everybody is seeking to milk the most of the political capital out of what is happening, painting themselves as saints and the others as sinners. So yes, that is really what we have.
Michael Agwanda, do you get the feeling that someone could be feeling like they've just been pinched by that particular remark by Raila Odinga, that there could be some issues that are so emotive in this campaign that no one wants the other side to touch on, that the moment the other side touches on, then you feel that you need to actually suppress that kind of discussion?
Thanks, Fred. As you can see, this issue is surrounding land. When you talk about land in this country, we are talking about a very emotive issue. Remember, TJRC report has not been presented to Parliament. Remember when the leader of majority once declared that this report will be tabled in Parliament within a week, it was not during the late Olin Timama's funeral. And again, when you talk about land, and especially to the Maasai community, you're speaking something that they know and they understand very well. We don't want to get deep into this, but what I have to tell you is I have to agree with Vincent that Raila will not be arrested, and I think that headline in the newspaper is just, to me, a whitewash. It is a rabble-rouser. Basically, what they want to do is to sell, and sell well for today. Because there should be no reason why Raila should be arrested or anybody should call for his arrest. The reason why I say this is, one, We have independent bodies in this country that are supposed to investigate and find one culpable of an offense. And if DPP has not done that, then why will the leader of majority, Aden Duale, decide that he need to call for the arrest of Honorable Raila? So you find that really questionable. Two, who does this directive come from? From the politicians. Do they have the ability and the power to be able to investigate this and also pass a judgment at the same time and say is guilty as charged? Absolutely not. What about the other arms of the government like NCIC that is actually supposed to be looking into issues of incitement under Honorable Kaparo? Have they come out and said that he has done something wrong and for that reason we are taking him to court? It was not just about saying it, but all these other bodies are saying we are waiting for the investigation. Now, if they are waiting for investigation, why will then they call for an arrest of an individual that is perhaps still being investigated? These bodies, these independent bodies are saying we've not even got any result. In fact, everybody is saying we are waiting, we are waiting. Whom are they waiting for? Why are the politicians taking an issue and blowing it out of the proportion for the purposes of gaining mileage in terms of luring sympathizers, voters to be on their side? But again, we have to be very careful when we're looking into this issue. We need to let our politicians know that incitement should not be allowed under any circumstances, because that is exactly what can take us back to where we do not want to go to. But as it is now, I can tell you, Fred, all this is hot air and it is not going to end anywhere.
Yes, Johnson Githaka, do you have the feeling that there are sections of the political divide that do not want some issues to come up as campaign agenda, like land, for example, that probably it is one of those no-go areas that anyone seeking to try and make it a campaign agenda will be attacked?
Thank you, Fred. I think we need to contextualize this debate. First of all, I think for the record, it's good to, acknowledge that the former Prime Minister has actually denied saying what he's alleged to have said. And I think it's important. It's good to give him the benefit of doubt. Because if he did say that, then that would be very uncharacteristic of somebody wanting to be the leader of this country. Honorable Raila is not just an ordinary politician out there trying to canvass for votes. He served in this country as the Prime Minister for 4 years. We know the record of the coalition government, and he rightfully takes credit for that. And we know him. He's been on this political struggle for the longest time. So I want to give him the benefit of doubt that he may not have said that. But in the event he said so, Idimuli, you must be able to look at it in the context of the numbers. You see, the two political formations have what they've presented to us as their strongholds and their so-called battlegrounds. At Kajiado and Narok, this is a predominantly Maasai voting bloc. It's supposed to be NASA. Anybody who has looked at the numbers, you know that is a false narrative. If you look at the numbers between Jubilee and in 2013, essentially those are areas you can never give to any political formation. Those are battlegrounds. The movement from 2013, and I've looked at these numbers very carefully, and anybody really who wants to say anything else must be evidence-based. The numbers are slipping such that you have a dead hit. Now, in the circumstances, friend, what you do is you need a spark to be able to tilt the narrative and the movement in your favor.
Yes.
And I think it's in the interest of NASA to do what it is doing, because if they don't do so, then even the votes that they actually got in 2013 are likely to slip away. Now, you just need to look at the by-election of 2016, and you will know that there's actually some shifting of numbers which is not in their favor. Now, if you address the issue of land, friend, in Maasai land, in other parts of this country, whether you talk about the coast or the Rift Valley, the major culprits is the political class.
Yes.
It is not the ordinary person who has bought a piece of land somewhere in Machakos or somewhere else. Those are not the people. The people who have alienated land across this country are not the ordinary Kenyans. They are the political elites. They are the ones holding acres and acres of land. And it's the same in Kajiado, it's the same in Mombasa. So really at the end of the day, the ordinary voter I think it's not as gullible as you want to imagine, that you want to incite him, that there is a community that is basically which are alienated to your life. They know better than that. So these are areas, friend, which I think even the media need to frame the issues in the proper perspective.
And I think you've just hit the nail on the head, that probably there's a lack of spark, and the politicians are all trying to get that spark that will create a movement or a buzz around their campaigns. Because we're seeing like there's a scramble, all politicians, all across political divides, all the political formations, each is trying to scramble to hold on to something that will last more than a week. Because all these discussions that come up only last a day and we forget. Talk about issues like UNGA, land now, IALA, IEBC tendering, ICC, things that start and within 2 days we forget. But Vincent Kimosop, is that the problem that we seem to be suffering from, a lack of a clincher or a proper one single agenda that will help mobilize voters either way?
I agree with you, Fred. You remember in 2013 the organizing question was the ICC.
Yes.
In 2007 it was 42 against 1. You remember that? And then in the year 2002 it was Yote Awezekana, Moi must go. So in 2017 the organizing question is not very clear. And the reasons would be as follows. Number one is that you have the NASA formation and the Jubilee formation, all of them people who have served as cabinet secretaries or ministers in their time. The NASA presidential candidate was our prime minister, and then Uhuru Kenyatta is president, and William Ruto deputy. So you have a situation whereby no one can really have and preach the message of change. And the failure of the independent candidates to organize themselves and give the country a clear third force, because if there was a third force, then the focus would be on issues. Currently it is whipping emotions and specifically tribal passions. Now the challenge is we also find ourselves in a situation whereby the framing of the organizing question is not very clear. And that's why ICC 2 days NASA comes out clearly, says that we have no intention of reviving or taking anyone to the ICC, it dies. Then the following day you talk about UNGA. You remember a rally in one of the, I think it was in one of the rallies where people were even saying UNGA, 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 Arambe, UNGA. And then when the government came up with the subsidy program, that UNGA thing went down. I can tell you, we saw the Prime Minister yesterday checking some of the shelves. That might last, but in the event, for example, you have UNGA back on the shelf, that will go. So that's why everybody must ensure that they have something that sustains them to the long term. And as I can say that since the message of change, none can speak, then it is about what have you done when you were in government. What is your track record? Now the problem of track record is that these people have different times that they've served and in different circumstances. But the challenge is also the Mwananchi may not easily understand all those things. So as I look at it, I would understand why you have to look for something that gets you 1 week by. And I can tell you, Fred, from this week, when you even scrutinize very well the postponement of the launch of the manifestos, I think we can get more information. Let me know.
And we'll be discussing that campaign agenda and the manifestos in a short while. But Michael Agwanda, what Bwana Kimosop says, do you think that yes, it is true that our politicians probably did not really think hard about when they're going into this election, what exactly will be the mobilizing question, as Bwana Kimosop puts it, but that they're now trying to, during a campaign, try to say something, see if it resonates well with your audience, then carry on with it, that they've been reduced to that?
I agree with them. I strongly believe that we are being failed as electorates of this country. We're being failed because what we hear today is not what we hear tomorrow. And it's amazing how they just pick on one issue and it becomes a national issue, even when it does not really warrant that kind of rhetoric. When we talk about UNGA, for example, UNGA is not just an issue that perhaps is being politicized in my view, but UNGA is an issue that is being experienced out there, and there is indeed a shortage, and a shortage that to me, I ask a very, very simple question. Where did 6 billion that was passed in the supplementary budget go to? My problem with the unga situation is we are having a situation where there's no unga in the shelf, and it cannot be seen in most supermarkets. And I'm not saying this because the former Prime Minister went to the supermarket and did not see a lot of unga for that reason. I'm saying this because we've seen clips of people scrabbling for the little unga in the supermarket and almost fighting one another because it's just shown up. My question is, the 6 billion that the government had release for unga, where is that money? Do we want to wait until the next 1 month or 2 months when harvest has already been done, and then we say now we have readily available unga and we've used our 6 billion for that reason to feed the country? We must also look at issues when we talk about issues of land. It is going to be there today and it's gone tomorrow. We need to look at issues of personal attack. One thing that perhaps I have not liked in the Jubilee sector and how they've been going around. Remember, you go to calls and they will tell you Jubilee has literally campaigned for Joho because they've gone there and blocked Joho in their campaigns, and it just made him bigger. Now, Jubilee group were in Kakamega, and when they were in Kakamega, what did they do? They go there to beg for votes, and they've got the biggest crowd you could ever imagine of, and then what do they do to their sons? The president says, leta hapa tutamnyorosha kweli kweli. And you see, those kind of rhetorics, those kind of individual attacks are taking us back to where we do not want to. I believe the government need to tell us a track record, not by mentioning individuals' name, but by pointing to the locals, every place they go to, and say, this is what we've done here, please vote us back. And when you look at also NASA on the other side, I will say it is very important that they stick to the rules, and not necessarily the rules, but they stick to what they want to do to this country.
But do they know what they want to say? Because that seems to be the problem. Because yes, they want to get elected, someone to retain power, but they do not seem to have any proper reason that they can tell this is why.
I think the most important thing is both aisles of the divides are looking forward to releasing their manifestos to us so that we can know exactly what they want. My question is, it's just a short.
But before we go back to
Fred, I think my friend has lived in the US for long. So the democracy, Barack Obama, very clear. And then, we also need to appreciate where we are at in our democracy, my brother, that we are still evolving. This, of course, is not in any way an excuse for tolerating intolerance, indifference, and also mediocrity. Yes. We need to up our game. But let's evaluate ourselves. For example, Fred, honestly, if I was to put responsibility, even, for example, in the media, when you have a screaming headline like arrest Raila, that if you challenge and you give them scrutiny, you don't feel, maybe more thought would have come into this. We are also becoming gullible into the political antics. I want to say this. When you look at the context we are in, and a very good example, we have a nurses' strike. We have even doctors who are not happy. I think for me, the context is there for any political formation to even. We don't need to wait for your manifesto. You can actually tell us. Let's look, for example, how will you solve health differently? Yes. Now that we have the right context, Fred, as I'm speaking to you, there is a reporter to Uhuru Park who is going to tell us. I think before we began the program, that's what you pointed out, how the strike, how they are progressing. Can you imagine if today we would also be hearing how any of the political divides, including the independents, could solve the health issue differently? Then that will be. So
we're not suffering. We're not suffering from a lack of problems to solve.
It is either it is the political class that hasn't come out very clearly. Look, for example, during the doctor strike, Fred, and I remember we participated in different talk shows. There is no discussion that we ever had on how any of the side will solve the problem differently. So I think for me, it is not that look at the Unga issue even now. The concern should not be how to get Unga on the table only. It should be how will we not come to this place again, because we had the same issue under the Grand Coalition government. We also have the same issue currently. So the context, if the political class would actually exploit, is how they would address this thing differently once and for all. Because you can imagine 54 years after independence, and we are still struggling with the basic unga. As in, I don't know how will we be talking about and compete, for example, with great countries when we haven't addressed the basics. So the context is there. We need to throw the challenge and accountability to the political class so that they up their game. And now failure by this political class to actually create the agenda of whatever they want to work on. But Githaka, do you agree with Kimosop that yes, this is mediocrity, that politicians want to get elected, want to hold office, but they cannot really tell us why they want to do so?
Friend, the audience to a great extent determines the messaging, the content and the style. In this country, and I think we have a few examples, if you set out to prosecute an issue-based campaign, it will not gain traction, right? And that's for a fact.
Yes.
You know the good old Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, when he stood for presidency, I mean a very well resourced gentleman. His agenda was basically issue-based, but it never gained traction. Our people, and this is something I think scholars will need to just address. They are fascinated by issues that excite them. You know, they don't address the mind, they address the heart. You know, that emotive approach is extremely unfortunate, because at the end of the day, this is something that you have to sustain using extreme utterances that
but even that seems to be missing. That even matters, even just them striking a chord within someone's inner feeling, if I may say so. None of the political divides seem to be actually doing it.
Absolutely. This is what I'm coming to, friend. And I'm saying, because of this narrative, because of basically how people seem to be quite excited. And you know, for instance, if you listen to a lot of informal political discussion, it's not so much about the issues, okay? Because you would expect, for instance, for the main issues to start actually emerging. If you followed, for instance, what happened in the US, the issues were very clear between the Democrats and the Republicans. If you actually looked at what has happened in Britain between the Conservative and the Labour Party, again, the issues are very well framed. And to a great extent, it also reflects essentially the characterization of the populace, of the voters. And it's all very well for us maybe to condemn the politician, but remember, the politicians are an extraction of ourselves. They represent you and me. These are not gentlemen and ladies who have come from another country. So the things that they talk are the things that you and me also tend to actually attach a lot of significance. And friend, if you look, for instance, even the kind of discourse that is there, whether it is the chat rooms and the WhatsApps, there are no substantive issues being canvassed by even the political elite, even at our level, whereby we say, for instance, what are the issues that are emerging in terms of taxation? What are the issues in terms of the size of government? What are the issues that are emerging in terms of inclusivity? Real issues, programs that you can see, that you're able to see the vision, that you're able to see basically the tactics that are going to deliver. We have not actually even ourselves helped our politicians to tell us, look, don't tell us about who is importing unga. Tell us how you address the issues of agriculture. How do you empower the farmers? How do you connect the farmer with the market? These are the issues, friend, which essentially will actually lower down, will moderate the politics, such that at the end of the day we are saying, you told us, for instance, on farming, and I was very interested because I saw some 5 points where NASA is saying how they are going to address various issues, including farming. One of the issues that struck me is they are anchoring the agricultural transformation on irrigation. And to be able to do so, they are going to build dams. Now, I said, hang on, but the same political formation is all over opposing the other political formation when they're doing the dams. Yes. So you see, that kind of internal contradiction tells you that nobody has actually sat down to crystallize the issues that should actually drive the debate.
Yes, and if you may look, probably draw a parallel with what happened in the United States, Donald Trump's campaign, the simple statement, "Make America Great Again," was enough to actually mobilize a whole section of America to vote for someone who the rest of the world did not imagine could be voted in. That seems to suggest that Donald Trump must have understood that there was a section of the electorate that needed something totally different. Is that kind of understanding well in with the politicians, that these are people who want to lead Kenya? Surely they need to take time and understand even the psyche of the electorate, that yes, these people, if you move them this way, they can actually vote for you. Even if you don't need to talk about such serious issues like health and agriculture. Bwana Kimosop, do you think our politicians understand what Kenyans really want, or what would actually move Kenyans in any particular direction?
Fred, allow me to give you a context. I have been in the field of advocacy for some time, and in advocacy you have to address the following three things. Number one, you have to address the head, and that is facts and figures. And you know, facts at times do not lie. Then number two, you have to address the heart. And then finally, the wallet. How much will it cost? How will we get the money? Now, in politics, it looks like politics is a question of emotions. You have to be able, the person who whips emotions. In fact, other people have spilled what Donald Trump was saying, that make America white, not actually great again. And indeed, the population that voted for Donald Trump, majority of them were the white population. So, and you can see he kept on speaking to his base. So I understand the challenge that politics, and as my colleague has pointed out, that we are not importing leaders, they are an extension of us. But I think, Fred, let's look at it. If you critically analyze Jubilee, and you ask yourself from an intellectual scrutiny, what is the philosophy that informs their approach to politics and their engagement, you can see really capitalism comes out as a market-driven way of solving problems in society, and a development narrative. If you hear them, tutajenga really, as in that is the way they speak, we will bring development. Now, if I listen and I clearly, from an intellectual perspective, look at the NASA narrative, the whole issue of social justice, the element of reform, distribution, giving everybody an opportunity, subsidy. So there are issues, yes. Even Third Way Alliance talks about constitutionalism, protecting and defending. So there are spaces whereby you can be able to get small touches of the issues within the different formation. But now the challenge we have is that they are not getting the prominence that they deserve. And I want to ask you, Fred, if like the headline today on in one of the papers, arrest Raila, that might actually lead to more sales from a business perspective. Yes. But if you had an agenda tomorrow about, as in talking about maybe like creating 1 million jobs, you know, a development narrative, looks like at times they don't sell. So we also need to educate and have these different actors help elevate our politics and our democracy to the place whereby we can see issues. Because I can tell you, I don't know if you've seen the leaflets that are circulating courtesy of what happened in Kajiado. It has given space to political fodder, so that then we whip emotion. So I think for me, we have the responsibility, some of us who sit in the platforms, we are, you Fred who is in the media, to help aggregate and reduce and keep the issue in check. Because if it's all about emotions, then
but we seem to be in agreement that yes, for Kenyans, for Kenyan voters, it has to do with emotions. Because to be honest, what happened in 2013, the ICC issue, it's not about health, it's not about security, it's not about agriculture. But Michael Agwanda, do you, this time around, how come our politicians missed out on something that could actually cause emotional upheaval, or rather emotionally appeal to any voters to vote any particular direction?
First, I want to dissent a little bit from the view that our politicians are a reflection of us. I can tell you that this country has not reached a point where our politicians are a reflection. Maybe partially. But I can tell you that the politicians we have been dictated by the parties that they belong to, that have been ruling this country for many, many years. I mean, there are people that once they're given a nomination certificate, whether you like him or not, he becomes your MP, he becomes your governor. And therefore, that might not be a reflection of us. That could have been somebody that was pressed upon the electorates by the parties of that particular time. And therefore, we should not say that these people represent us 100%. Most of these politicians will tell you that I bought this position and therefore I really care less about you to say until the next general election, look for some money and buy those positions in the nomination. And therefore, if we say that they are a reflection of us, then perhaps we will be returning them into parliament. You know that statistic. It's about over 65% of our politicians don't go back to parliament. Why? Because they never represented us in the first place. But coming into what happened, with Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America. It was issue-based, and that is why he was voted for. He realized that a lot of companies were offshore, they were in China, and for that reason he needed to bring them back, and for that reason he needed to promise his people the jobs. And as a result, these people who did not have jobs made sure that they voted for him. He talked about immigration, and he said, look, non-immigrants in this country perhaps need to go back. Perhaps Mexico needs to build a wall. Maybe those are some of the issues that our politicians should be addressing today. But if we are having issues with Somali, which is our border, how do we first track ensuring that that wall is completed so that we do not have the incidents of Al-Shabaab coming into this country to kill people? Perhaps we need to hear about this issue-based campaign, which I am missing in this campaign. I know that both aisles of the divides are now saying, look, we will make sure that we have free secondary school, and now it's a time frame. NASA is saying, we'll have it immediately. Jubilee is saying, oh no, we'll start it next year.
But they're saying the same thing.
It's still the same thing. They're talking about issues of development. And I want to partially also dissent from what Vincent is saying, that perhaps we are looking at capitalism, a bit of ideology here, and socialism ideology. Let me tell you, these aisles of the divides don't really seem to get something that is totally different and strongly embedded on capitalism and socialism ideology. What they have is issues that perhaps have not been implemented well that they want to implement. When we talk about issues of AGR, they say it is good. But look here, how much was spent? So it goes beyond that. And I think those accountabilities is perhaps what the government, I want to see a government, especially a Jubilee party that is running this country, come up and say, look, we implemented this. And if the opposition comes up and says, you didn't do it well, they should be able to defend it in a more positive way than just saying, those Kitandawili people, those Kitandawili people. I mean, we are fed up of hearing the Kitandawili people.
Okay,
we now need facts so that this thing, you know, people are voted on issue-based, but I'm not getting that.
Let's now take a break. Let's take a break. In the next hour, we'll take this conversation a little bit further. Both the parties, both NASA and Jubilee, were initially set to launch their manifestos this week. NASA was actually supposed to launch its own manifesto today. That has since been postponed to next week. The reason why they gave is not really convincing, but we'll go with it. Jubilee is still supposed to launch its manifesto this week. Whether or not they will do it, we just have to wait and see. When it comes to discussing manifestos, it's beyond the emotions, it's down to the issues. Why are they waiting? 49 days to the elections, does it mean